Hi guys, it's Carlo here. Thank you for listening to our latest episode. It's the support of our community like you that allows us to continue to grow and make this into something truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to listen to it without the interruption of ads and maybe even experience some bonus content, I'd invite you to join us on our newly launched Patreon. And if maybe that's not something you can do right now, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on places like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that good stuff. You'll find us under @Millennials and Community for pretty much all of those. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Millennials and Community Podcast. Join us as we dive deeper into the skills and mindset that makes Carlo Carlo, how his unique experiences have impacted him, and how he hopes to be of service to the world. Thank you for being part of our community.
What's up, everybody? We are back for another episode of the Millennials and Community Podcast. I'm Matt. This is Carlo, and today's episode is all about Carlo. If you caught us for the last episode, we are taking a little bit of a deep dive. We're giving a chance for each of us to reintroduce ourselves to you. And while we understand and we know that a lot of those of you who are tuning into our show either know us very well outside the show, or you followed this show for long enough that you think you know us pretty well, we want to have an opportunity to kind of dive in because, we realize that to some of you, we may just be two people talking about stuff. And I think that there is enough work and depth that each of us has going on that is really, really useful for us to be able to kind of provide some context, some grounding, some foundation into the ideas that we have and the reasons why we want to share the things that we share. And so, I'm really, really excited for all of you to, and myself potentially, to get to know Carlo a little bit better today. So, in true Mac fashion, we're going to start out with a little bit of a sillier question to really get those creative juices flowing. And of course, for those of you who want to listen to the last episode, you would have heard this in the last episode. But Carlo, if you could have a superpower, but only for a day, what superpower would you want shared your way?
I really like the idea of being able to read people's minds, to hear their thoughts. It would be a shame that it would only be for one day, although it could potentially get very, very annoying depending on the thoughts. But I feel there's so many things that go left unsaid because people are afraid of how they will be taken, how they will be perceived, how, that might, and rightfully so. Sometimes there are comments that shouldn't be said, but for a lot of times, I think that there are even well-meaning and good things that are left behind closed doors because people don't know how to get them across. And I would just love to be the kind of person that could help others because I could hear all the things that they didn't know they needed to say.
Now, do you think it would be something where you would want it to be a switch where you could choose to or not to, or would you just want that fire hose in your face?
Ideally it would be a switch that would make things a lot easier. You meet that person, you're off. But I guess if I'm only getting it for a day, I want that switch for sure.
I can only imagine how much information, how much data your brain would just be trying to absorb. That'd be super intimidating. I'm just thinking about the ramifications of that. It'd just be...
Well, there's a really great movie and I can't remember what it's called, but it's got Mel Gibson in it and he gets struck by lightning and all of a sudden can hear the thoughts.
Is it What Women Want?
Sure. Yeah, probably. He gets struck by lightning and he can hear the thoughts of all the women in his life. And of course it's a rom-com. So you get to hear all of these, funny things, but Mel Gibson does such a great job of he gets insulted by this woman, in her brain, and he's, right? So if he had the switch to turn it off, but it became overpowering for him very quickly.
Amazing. So really what we're wanting to do here today is create, again, that opportunity for you to like share that depth of yourself, that opportunity for you to illustrate and create that base for people to understand the worlds in which you're a part of. And if there's an opportunity, because I know you're really passionate about being able to support people both within and outside the podcast. And so we want to create the opportunity for, if anybody listening is like, oh, that's something that I think that I could receive support on from Carlo, that we wanted to give you the understanding of where those places are, those foundational spots. So absolutely, just I guess to kind of kickstart that conversation, tell us about a time that you felt is really pivotal in your life and how it shaped your perspective and led you to our podcast.
So, I early in season 1, we did kind of an Our Stories episode, right? And I shared a little bit about some of the key moments in my life. So I'm not going to get too much into detail, but there was a large portion of my adult life where times were hard. Times were hard financially, socially, relationship-wise. They were hard in a lot of different ways. And as I came out of that scenario and I started to really rediscover the things that were important in my life and start to experience some success again, it created this frame of reference for me of like, oh, I went through a lot of that because I didn't have the right kind of people in my life that were willing to speak up. And I'm not putting any sort of blame on anybody else but myself. But we all hope that the communities that we're part of and the friends that we have are going to be the kinds of people that when they see something wrong in your life, that they're going to be like, hey, this is how I feel about it. And unfortunately, either I was deaf to it or I wasn't getting it in a way that I was willing to accept. And as I came out of this scenario, it became very important to me that with all of the skills and all of the hard and all the lessons that I had learned, I wanted to be able to help other people skip those hard lessons, right? There's on one hand, sometimes you believe it's best for people to go through hard so that they can appreciate the good. But on another hand, sometimes there's some hards in life that are not required for the kind of lesson that they give you. So I became very committed to just trying to help people skip some of the harder, unnecessary things. Right. And that kind of led me to this show it led me to a lot of things because I do some personal content as well, which unfortunately has taken a little bit of a backstage pass to this show for good and bad reasons. But, I wanted to get my voice out there. I wanted people to know that whatever it was that they were going through, there are other people that went through it as well, and that you don't have to go through it alone.
I think that's really wonderful. And I think that's so important for people to know that there's a space or a person that maybe can relate to what they're going through. And I know that that's something that you find a lot of responsibility for, and being able to share in the right circumstances the things that you've experienced in order to help other people, pave the way to a less bumpy ride through the same lessons. So with that in mind, like, how do you go about doing that? Like, what would you say are the certain skills or perspectives, like, not reading minds, but your real life superpowers? Like, what are some of those things that allow you to be able to do those things and support those people in that way?
Well, the easiest way I can put it is that I like to call myself a professional problem solver, right? I am the guy that people will call when there is a problem that needs fixing. And, I mentioned this earlier. There was a time in my life where everything was hard. There was not a part about it that was easy. So because of that, I have developed skills in so many different areas of life. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, professionally speaking, I am the money guy, right? I help people on a day-to-day basis fix their money woes,
move themselves forward faster, get out of debt, do better. If they were doing good, do better. Simple things, advanced things, all of that kind of stuff. That's on the professional level. On the more social and personal level, how to deal with mental health issues, how to, have better relationships with their spouses, with their friends, with the people in their lives, how to just grow as a human being, because when everything in your life is bad, the one thing you can control is yourself, right? So I became very, very good at those kind of things. So I have, some really great professional pursuits that I'm able to help people with. But as a whole, I like to believe that there's not many problems out there for a millennial in his 20s or 30s that I haven't come across. Now, that may sound ostentatious, and I know that's how it sounds, but I feel very blessed for the lessons that I learned. I just don't want anybody else to have to go through them if they don't have to.
Mm. So you talk about all of the lessons and all of the challenges and how that's equipped you to just be this resource of support to so many people. But what do you like? What sort of things help inform you as a resource? I've got this whole library metaphor in my head right now. Like, what sorts of resources or information conduits do you rely on to shape what you think of when you think of community?
First and foremost, it's the people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? So doing what I do on a professional level, you have to imagine that I meet a lot of people in great positions and I meet people that are in not so great positions. And then because of that, I get to learn very, very quickly what it is that's important to people. Now, we've all heard the headlines of how expensive groceries are right now and interest rates are high and all that kind of stuff. But it's the personal impact and the little things that you might not think about if that isn't impacting you directly, right? So you might sit down with somebody and you'll expect them to say that, well, groceries are so expensive, I can't afford them. We've had to stop, buying, meat, right? Steak. But then you learn it means that all I'm doing is feeding my kids cardboard pizza, right? And then you start to look and they say it's causing health issues in the family, because that's another big part for me is my health, right? So you never think about the impact that, having less money would mean that you're feeding your kids more poorly, which means that they're not sleeping well, which means that they're not healthy, which means they're doing worse in school. So first and foremost, it's the people that I meet with and the stories that I get to hear about the impact that their finances and the other things going on in life might have. I'm also very much a two sides of the coin kind of guy. I will intentionally search out the other perspective, right? So, if I see a news article about something, I will find the opposing news article, the opposing comment, because I want to know more about it. So I've always valued very much the interactions I have with my community, but then also want to know what's the other side of the coin look like.
For sure. No, I think that's fantastic. And it definitely comes across in the way that you hold yourself, and you're so patient when you receive information, because you always want to wait and see what else, right? And you're so keen to understand different perspectives and different ways of knowing. So I think that's really, really great. So why a podcast? Like, what is it that inspired you to want to start a podcast, and like, what are you hoping to get from it on a personal level?
Well, similar to the way you answered this question, there was that moment where we looked at each other and said, let's start a podcast. So there was that, but I have had many a moment in my professional career where I've been given the opportunity to speak publicly. I also have been told by others and feel myself to be somewhat of a wordsmith. Now, that doesn't always I've had to articulate super well, in the live format, but there are times where I can come across quite eloquent. And as I started to realize that I had this gift, quote unquote, of speech, and I had this ability of understanding and the lessons learned, I realized I needed, for my own benefit, to get my voice out there. There was one particular time, shortly after a lot of the hard had ended, that I got an opportunity to speak on a stage. And it was such a simple speech that I wrote it, 5 minutes before I got up there. And after the talk, I felt so empowered and so much myself that I realized that this was something I needed to do. So when the opportunity to have a podcast and to start a podcast with you came out, it was just another avenue to get my voice out there. And most intriguingly to me, an avenue to get my voice out with an opposing voice, right? Because we like to play off of each other during our show. So, if one of us says something, the other will try and be the devil's advocate on that. And I think that is so important. And, I've always believed you don't know what you don't know. And there are a lot of things that you do know that I don't. And I think vice versa. So, my hope is that we can continue to bring those perspectives to this show with the experience and the understanding that we do have, to make it something that is such a well-rounded experience that most people won't be able to find it anywhere else.
That's fantastic. And in the vein of things we know and things we don't know, obviously, like, a big part of this investment that we hope that our audience is making and investing their hard-earned time with us in terms of listening or watching, right, that we do, I think it's really important for us to keep up to date on the stuff that we're talking about, so that, we're sharing things that are relevant or sensible or up to date or current. Think of it however you like. So what do you do to try to stay informed and keep on top of whether it's trends or current events related to millennial culture, community? Like, what do you do to stay on top of it?
Well, as much as it has a negative connotation sometimes these days, social media has been a big part of that for me. And it never used to be. But interestingly enough, when COVID happened, what else did we really have to do besides social media? So I found myself spending a lot more time on Reddit and a lot more time on TikTok. Now, TikTok is probably one of the farthest things from a millennial social media network. But it ain't Facebook, and it maybe is Instagram. But I found that I was able to curate my social media in such a way that I was getting the things that I wanted. And because I'm that person that values both sides of the coin, I never just got one perspective. So even to this day, a good example of this is I seem to get all of the liberal propaganda, and I also seem to get all of the conservative propaganda. And it can be frustrating on both sides because I hate propaganda as a whole, but it's super interesting to see how they kind of swing this pendulum back and forth.
Sure.
So as much as there may be other things I could probably be spending my time on, I do find a lot of value in social media, in consuming good content. I'm also one of those people that really values learning new skills. So I will find, one particular thing that might captivate my attention for a little bit, and I will consume everything I can on that. And sometimes that, is things like a good example would have been the submarine disaster. I went down an engineering rabbit hole to understand how that thing worked, what had gone wrong, how they built it, everything. And I find that having that understanding of those kind of things on a deeper level makes it so that you're less likely to just have a random opinion about a whole bunch of billionaires dying in the submarine underwater, right? You have more of an opinion about a bad business practice, right? Like, it just opens your idea to so much more. And I tend to do that with a little bit of everything, right? So I feel that helps me keep my finger on the pulse, quote unquote.
No, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Tell us a personal story, because, you know, we know that there's no shortage of personal stories. Tell us one that for you draw on a lot when you think of the value and the impact of community. Like, tell us about a time where community has impacted you in a profound way.
Sure. Well, as part of the hard that I went through, there was no community for me. So when I started to rediscover the people in my life that had really always been there, they never went away. You being one of them. When I started to rediscover those people, I got to really rediscover myself, because people have this impression of you. It doesn't matter how long it's been since they've seen you, they'll have this impression of you. And when you seem to have lost who you are as a person and you re-enter a community or a scenario where somebody has that idea of who you are, especially when that was a good idea in the past, it helps you re-actualize that person again. So the communities that I had, all these friendships that I had, as I stepped back into them and these people placed these expectations on me of like who I used to be, it really helped me recapture that. And that was invaluable for me because I was so lost as a person. I had no idea who I wanted to be or who I was. So to all of a sudden step back in and, you know, have these people unconsciously say like, oh, you're Carlo, you're this giving, this caring, this loving guy who, you know, is venturous and values this and values that. It's like, oh, you figured this out for me already. Thanks.
So how do you reconcile that then? How do you reconcile coming out of this place where you are relying on these friends of yours to share back with you who you used to be, but then having gone through so many significant life events, how did those things, blend together to create a whole new Carlo? What did that look like for you?
Well, there was a lot of things that, again, you know, I use this concept in the last episode, but that felt like home, right? Like there's certain things that you do, certain things that are said to you that just feel right. So there wasn't a lot that I encountered that didn't feel right, but there was several moments where I had this kind of realization of like, oh, you as a person, you as a community, you don't know what I've gone through. So because of that, you don't know how I think anymore. And it gave me this really great opportunity to decide whether I wanted to hold on to the new way of thinking or try and go back to the old way of thinking. And I remember there was a moment over COVID where I was pretty heavily involved with a men's group. And I remember having this thought process of, or trying to talk my way through it with this group of this idea of, I think I've hit the point where I'm no longer running from, but now I don't know what to run to. And one of the guys looked at me and he says, well, you're still just so hung up on your past. And that was actually one of the moments I decided to step away from the group, because I realized that my entire picture for this group of men that didn't know me before was based entirely off of my fart. And I was now getting ready to be over that. So I needed to surround myself with people that were going to be where I was running to. So that's part of why I think our relationship has grown so strong and why this podcast has meant so much to me, is because this became something to run to.
Okay. Right? I think that's really, really fantastic. I love that idea of home. I love that idea of places where you know you can feel safe and feel like yourself. And I think that that's really, really important and very, very evident in your experience, or my experience with you, is that you're trying to create that for others as well. And so I think that's really, really evident in what you try to create for the people around you. It's really, really wonderful. What do you talk a lot about ensuring that you are looking for the other side of the coin, that you're looking to seek out those different perspectives in your pursuit of the information, the knowledge, to making sure you're up to date and relevant. Now, what do you think needs to happen? What do you think you and I need to do to make sure that those diverse perspectives are always represented on our show?
Well, in specific on our show, I think that we would be doing a disservice, because you and I think very closely to each other in a lot of ways. And I think we would be doing a disservice to not only ourselves, but to our listeners if we weren't actively trying to almost combat each other on certain things. Right? Like when think about the Barbie movie episode, that came by naturally. We didn't need to say, well, you take that side and I take this side. We both had somewhat opposing thoughts of the movie. But I got to play devil's advocate for a certain amount of things, and it opened up the conversation in a whole new way. And I think that as long as we're willing to continue playing devil's advocate, even on things that we might agree upon, I think we can bring some really great perspectives to some of the things we talk about. And of course, having other guests. And for me, one thing that I want to expand upon on that is like, yes, a guest with a different perspective goes without question, but a guest with a different skill set too, I think brings some really amazing opportunity for discussion, because there might be problems in this world that you and I would tackle one way, but somebody with a whole different vocation might tackle another. And those are the kind of things that I want to learn about, right? Because everybody has an idea how to fix a problem, but like, are we asking the people that are actually trained to fix that problem?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I think that's great. You talk a lot about being active and staying active, and I think that that's a very great way of framing the value of staying on top of information, making sure you're consuming up-to-date information from different perspectives. It's that being active, not expecting information to just come to you, but going out and seeking it out. So in that same vein, what do you think, like, what do we need to do to make sure that the podcast continues to evolve and stay relevant in the same way that you seek those out?
I'm going to talk to our audience right now. We need your perspectives, right? We need your engagement. We need your ideas, right? It is one thing for us to try and look for the other needs and the other perspectives out there. It is another thing to be told of them. So I never want us to lose our willingness to take criticism, to take new ideas from other people. It's part of what has driven us down this, reframe of our show, is that we have taken the opinions of other people into this, and I think hopefully for the better, right? So we want to hear your input, because it's the only thing that's going to allow us to create something truly unique for you guys.
You heard it here. Give us your input, please, and thank you. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions, and then you'll have the chance to kind of speak to us in a way with those melodic tones, and basically just wrap it up in a way that you feel captures everything else that you want to share about yourself in this episode. But first, tell us about something memorable or funny that happened behind the scenes that you want to share with all of us.
You have such a one-track mind sometimes.
Oh dear.
And when you are hungry, you start to use all of that, whatever food you're craving, in your analogies.
Fruit for thought, as it were.
Fruit for thought. You did one about popcorn once. You did one about pie once. And so it comes through in our show, but a lot of times I think people might not catch it because they're like, what did he just say? Meanwhile, every time I've stopped the camera, you're like, pie this, pie that. Oh, is there pie? Like, do we need to go and get you a pie? And I die every time, because I have never seen a man so all encompassed with food, but not food, just one food at a time. And it makes me laugh every time.
You're reminding me that I haven't eaten lunch today. Interesting.
Pie.
Well, and so since that's your behind the scenes moments, let's bring it front and center. I mean, we've completed one full season of our podcast now. It's 22-ish episodes. We've explored lots of different things. What's your vision? What's that pie in the sky for you for season 2? What are you most excited about in our next season?
I'm excited for this season for a lot of reasons. I'm excited to, again, be back in a place where you and I get to converse and to grow and to share and to explore some of these new current events, I think is really cool. But if we think about the ultimate vision that I have for this show, is that every episode that we do, every piece of content that we do is driven by the need of our community.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's really nice to do an episode on something that you and I are struggling with, or a pop culture event, or something going on in our world. But I envision this idea where we have our listenership send us an email and say, hey, this is what I'm going through in my world right now. How would you guys handle that? And then we have an entire episode on trying to steer this person in a direction that we think would benefit them. Right? Can you imagine if every episode we did, I'm not talking a call-in show, right? Although something like that might be fun now and then.
Not for nothing. You just said, send us an email and call-in show. It's a good thing that now we've rebranded to being Millennials and Community.
Yeah, right. But I want this to be something that drives you guys for the things that you need. Because, this episode and the past episode have been about what it is that Matt and I have in terms of skills that we can offer you. Allow us to put that to work.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So with that, I'm going to put you to work one last time. We've gone through a pretty comprehensive, I feel like I just interviewed you for a job. What are the things that you wanted to be able to share with our audience in this format, in this episode, that you feel you want to really hammer home, or you want to leave us remembering? What are those things that you feel you haven't done justice yet that you want to make sure you leave the audience with today?
The entire reason that I want to create a show that is driven by you guys is to prove your value and worth to the community as a whole. Right? Your ideas and the struggles that you have in your life are so much more than your own. You don't have to go through them alone, whether they're good or bad. Allow us to celebrate your wins too, because that's so important. But you should have a community. You should have a group of people, online or offline, that give you the space to be you, to be encouraged, to have support when you need it. And whatever that looks like for you, whether it's this show or you're just passing through, I wish that for you. That would be the one thing I would really want to press on.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Do you want to bring us home, bring us into the end, either with our gratitudes or any other final messages or thoughts you want to leave with us?
Yeah. So my gratitude for today is just is the opportunity to explore myself through these questions. Right? It's a rare occurrence to have somebody interview you for whatever reason. Think about all the times you've done a job interview and then you leave that interview and you're like, oh, I've never been asked that question before. Or scrambling to try and figure that out. I think it's so important that we have this kind of introspection, and it's somewhat fitting because we're filming this episode right before the new year, and I think that everybody goes through a little bit of that introspection right around this time. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity and to be in a place that vulnerability is appreciated, so that I can say what I want to say.
I think that's fantastic. I'm really grateful for you. The other side of the coin. I'm really, really grateful for you for being so willing to share, and not only share in the context of this show, but being so willing to share everything that you've gone through in the selfless hope that it means that someone else might not Me too. And I think that that's so wonderful, and it really shows the character, the strength and character that I know you to have. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, guess I'll close us off then. This has been the third episode of our second season of the now Millennial and Community podcast. I hope it's become apparent to you guys that we are really hoping to create this all-inclusive community. You know, whether you are a millennial or not, it doesn't matter to us, because struggles are struggles and wins are wins, and life is life, no matter where you come from, who you are. So we would ask that you guys engage with us, help us create that community that we really want. Find us on all the social media platforms. Like, subscribe, comment, send us an idea. Tell us we're doing good. Tell us we're doing bad.
Send us emails and phone calls, because that's what we ask them to do as millennials.
Yeah, emails, I think, is the most popular form of communication for millennials.
But yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. You're like DMs, and all our millennial people are saying, what's it? Anyway, go on.
So don't DM us, especially Matt. Just emails.
Perfect.
That makes me think we should probably, well, we have an email address.
Email address.
Yeah, it's menandcommunity@gmail.com, I think.
Not for much longer.
No, I'll have to change it. All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. We will see you in the next episode of the Millennial and Community Podcast.
1, 2, 3, 4. See if I can time the phase out music.
Bye, guys.
Take care.